I made a stamp every day for a month, and this is a video about that. Hi, my name is Davi, and maybe you're here because you saw one of my stamp videos on Instagram. I made 31 stamps in March, and it was kind of crazy, but it was a lot of fun, so I'm here to talk about it. In this video, I'm going to show you how I make a stamp from start to finish. I'll show you the sketching process and the carving and the assembly process of making a stamp. But that's part 2 of this video. If you want to jump straight to that, here's a little timestamp. Before I show you how to make a stamp, I just wanted to have a little chat. I feel like Instagram Reels is not very conducive to like having like a long form chat. So that's why I'm like excited to be here on YouTube to give you more of like an in-depth look into 31 stamps in March. So why did I make 31 stamps in March? I started this project primarily because art stopped being fun. In 2023, I feel like I barely picked up a pencil, if ever. And I was okay with it because I knew that the problem was that art stopped being fun. And it felt counterintuitive to like put pressure on myself to make art. So I started doing other things. I like was writing music and I was crocheting and journaling and doing stuff like that. And even though I wasn't making art, I feel like I kept the practice of like using my creative like brain and thinking about like silly like cartoons and silly comics that I could do. But I wasn't actually making anything, which then became a problem because I'm like, you can think all you want, but maybe you need to start materializing something. Then 2024 came and I felt like I needed a little push to start making more art and like drawings and illustrations. 31 stamps in March was the perfect thing because it was like something small and manageable and something so silly. Like it did not have to be like very conceptual and very like serious. Even though I keep saying that I wanted something simple and silly to do every day, I feel like I did make things hard for myself sometimes, especially like the stamps that have like 2 colors. Like there was a lot of extra work that I had to put in to make that happen, but I had such a like strong vision in my mind and I didn't want to like half-ass it, you know what I mean? Because even though it was like an exercise in like doing something every day, I feel like I keep repeating myself so much in this video, so I apologize. But even though, what was I saying? Even though it was an exercise of doing something every day, I did want to make something that I was happy with every day. This is the stamp that started it all. At the beginning of the year, I was dog sitting, and Cooper, the dog in the stamp and the dog in real life, he was sleeping on the couch, and I took a picture of him. And days later, I was looking at the picture, and I was like, this could be such a cute like illustration. And then I started sketching, and immediately I could like see it as a stamp. So I was super excited and I went to the store and I bought some rubber and some wood and I made it happen. This is actually the first stamp that I've ever made. I had carved before like in high school, but that's like almost 10 years ago and never made something in this format. So actually this is the second try of this stamp because the first try was really bad. Yeah, after I made this stamp, I was like, this is like manageable. I feel like I could do one of these every single day. And that's how this project started. It felt like something that I could like tangibly do every single day and like have a final product by the end of the day and then like move on to the next thing. And I felt like when I was having problems like making art, it was because I was like putting too much pressure onto the final product and like I don't know, I was just like being way too serious. And for me, like silliness is like a big thing. And stamp making made it very easy for me to like make a silly image because they're so small. So like I didn't have to like think about like a background or like the lighting or like anything. I could just like make an image that made me laugh and then carve it and then that's it. Like I'm done with the stamp. And originally I wasn't planning on sharing my stamps with the world, but then I made like my calendar and I realized that it could be a really silly, fun thing to like share every day. And then that's how the videos came into play. But I will say right now that making the videos was my least favorite part about this project because it added more time to the work that I was doing. Even though I wasn't doing anything else in the month of March, I was working on this project for a lot every single day. Like every stamp took me at least like 4 to 6 hours to make from start to finish, and that's including like editing the video for Instagram. And yeah, even though it's my least favorite part, I'm glad that I started doing that, because connecting with people was also something that I was missing from all that time that I wasn't making art. And I appreciate every single comment and every single DM and every single like that I received. So thank you. Now I think I'll take a second to talk about the anatomy of the stamp, but also about how the project went. You saw this stamp already. This is the first stamp that I made, and this stamp block is made out of like smaller wood blocks that I glued together, and it definitely like looks nice and it works, but this is not my favorite way to make a stamp. This is my favorite way to make a stamp. These are second hand wood blocks that I bought off from Facebook Marketplace. I got like 30 of them for really cheap, and I feel like they add like more character to the stamp and like more whimsy. And like I said earlier, if things are not silly, they're not fun. These wood blocks are also like the exact size that I used for the calendar that I created for the month. And there's also like smaller blocks that I have, and there's big ones, and these are double the size of the first wood block. So sometimes whenever I needed a break from like making a stamp, I would skip a day and then use one of these big ones to cover 2 days in the calendar. And I did that, one, to give myself a break, but also because I wanted to explore like a bigger format sometimes. However, every time that I did use one of these big ones, I also made like a tiny stamp to go with it, because at the beginning of this project, it was like make a stamp every day. That was the goal. And then I realized that sometimes I needed a little bit more time than a day to make a stamp. I just like needed more time to like either sketch and doodle what I wanted the stamp to look like, or life got in the way and I needed like a second to like get back on my feet. So I bent the rules so that I could use a big one to like save my ass whenever I needed to. My biggest fear this whole project was that I was going to give up, and I didn't want to give up. So finding this like little like cheat code really helped me in the long run. And again, like, things needed to be fun for me, and I didn't want to put pressure on myself. So I was just like, you know what? It's okay not to make a stamp every day as long as you make 31 stamps in the month. And I ended up doing that. So I'm very happy with myself. And I guess that would be like an advice or a tip for someone that wants to start like an everyday challenge. And that is to bend the rules. It's better to bend your own rules than to just give up, because it's super easy to give up when no one is holding you accountable. Like, I know that to be true. I feel like I've started projects in the past and I've given up really quickly and without a second thought, because there was no one like holding me accountable. Okay, I think I'm ready to show you how I make a stamp. On the right, I'm showing you how I trace my drawing using my iPad, and on the left is a time lapse of the drawing process of the stamp. It started off as a human holding up this like huge cup that had a flower coming out of it, and then it ended up being a tiny mouse holding up a regular sized coffee cup. I struggled a little bit with the legs of the mouse, but I think I figured it out. At first I had an orchid, as you can see, coming out of the cup, but I've been seeing a lot of daffodils on my walks recently, and I was like, let me switch that up. And then I was like, wait, maybe there's a small mouse coming out of the daffodil, and then that's what you see here. In this drawing, I'm like really excited by the movement that the tail of the bigger mouse makes going into like the stem of the flower, and then out of the tail of the smaller mouse inside the daffodil, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think I'm in my era of like making things that make me smile, and this drawing makes me smile. So I'm really excited about this stamp. Now that my drawing's ready, I can prep my rubber for carving. I use this cheap craft acrylic paint to paint a thin layer onto my rubber so that I can see where I've carved. If this doesn't make any sense right now, it'll make sense later. I promise. The base of the stamp is the Speedball rubber by Speedball, by the way. And this is how I transfer my drawing. I just use regular tracing paper, and for some reason the graphite like loves the rubber, so all I have to do is rub it down, and it's so easy. I use this like wooden handle from a cabinet that broke, so anything can work. And yeah, look, it's like, it's so magical. Every time I do it, I'm like, ah. I use the Lino cutter from Speedball. I think it's called set number 1. It comes with 5 nibs, but I literally only use these 2 nibs. I use the thinner nib and the thicker nib, and then the other 3 literally never touch them, but feel free to explore, obviously. This is how the tool works. If you've never used a tool like this, you like screw on the nib onto the top, and then we're ready for carving. Step number 1 for me is to carve around the outline of my design. remember with carving, you carve out the whites of your design and you keep the blacks. And I would be as slow as you want to be, as slow as possible, because with rubber, it's not very forgiving. After you've cut, you can't go back. So yeah, be patient. You'll see me do this a lot throughout the video. I move the rubber to guide the nib. I feel like it just makes for like a smoother line. So I recommend you do that. I would say that this is more of a demonstration than a tutorial. I want to remind everyone that I'm not a professional. I'm just a baby printmaker, and this is how I do things. So if you find that something else works for you, do not feel like you're doing it wrong, because I don't know what I'm doing half of the time. But yeah, after I've carved the entirety of the outline, I move on to the wider nib to carve out all the excess rubber around the design, because you really don't need it at this point. I think this shot is a great example of why I paint my rubber before I start carving. If I weren't to paint my rubber before, I wouldn't be able to tell where I've cut. I don't know why the rubber doesn't come painted. I feel like that should just like be how it comes, but I digress. The nib is your friend, especially for smaller details. Be as light as possible. You don't need a deep cut or a heavy hand to carve the rubber. So go bit by bit, be patient, be kind to your rubber, and you'll figure it out. The more you carve, the more comfortable you're going to be with your tool, and the better you're going to know like at what angle to cut things. Sometimes it's better to like come at things than to come from them. I don't know how to explain it, but the U shape of the nib makes it so that there are different angles to cut, where you like can cut like a thinner, sharper detail, or like a more curved detail. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, you'll see more of me carving. I use this brush sometimes to like brush away some of the rubber clippings, just because sometimes they get in the way, and I don't want to use my fingers because sometimes it rubs on the graphite and then like the drawing gets all muddy. So I recommend like having a brush in hand, like a fluffy, like cheap brush, just to like brush away. And yeah, you'll see me more of the carving. I don't know what else to say. Again, I feel like this is more a demonstration than a tutorial, because there's only so much I can explain, I feel like. At this stage of the process, I like doing a little test sprint. I just use like regular ink pad, nothing fancy, and I do this in my sketchbook. And yeah, I use like a wooden block to press it down. Do, 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 do. And yeah, it's time to talk about chatter. Chatter are those like little grainy lines around your design. You can keep as much chatter as you want. A lot of printmakers like chatter because it gives the drawing like more texture. I usually refrain from keeping a lot of chatter just because I feel like sometimes it like muddies the design. So it's at your disclosure. No, digression. That's the word. I use some block printed ink and some brayer to label my stamp block, and some brayer and a brayer. Here I'm rolling the ink. You want to be as uniform as possible. You don't want like an ink pocket because it could mess up your print. And yeah, now I'm just rolling the ink onto the rubber. I am taking my time. I use water-based inks because these stamps are for me. If I were to make a stamp for someone else, I would probably use like an oil-based ink because they're more permanent. You'll see later in the video that these inks can sometimes smudge. And because they're for me, I'm fine with it. But yeah, they're not the most permanent. Here's my little stamp block. I prepped the block off screen because these are secondhand blocks, and like your blocks might be different from mine, so I didn't feel the need to show it. But I sanded it down so that I had like a clean slate so that I could print my label onto my block. And this is how I do it. I just use another block to press it down and make sure that I get every single corner. And yeah, this is the label. This is like, I feel like the first look at the final stamp. Like it makes me so excited to like be done. And yeah, now I'm showing you how I glue my stamp onto the block. I use like the cheapest wood glue. I just like had this like laying around, so I didn't want to buy more glue, and this is what I use, and it's worked really good so far. So yeah, use whatever glue you have at hand. I would recommend like a wood glue or like a cement or something like that. Now this is pretty self-explanatory. I'm just pressing down my stamp onto the block, and yeah, this is like I keep saying and yeah, but guys, like this is my first video, so like give me a break, please. This is the final stamp. Yay! I'm really like pressing that down. I'm making sure that it's secure. Oh, here's where it's smudged. See how it smudges a little bit? Not the best, but they're for me, so I don't really care that much. If it was for someone else, I would use a better ink or like seal the ink somehow. But it's fine. That's the final stamp. Here I'm showing you the final stamping. I use the Recollections ink. They're pretty cheap. They're pigment ink pads. They're not archival. They're just like fun colors. Or maybe they are archival. I'm not sure. This is how you saw me do this earlier on my sketchbook, but this is the final stamp, and it's so much easier to stamp a stamp when you have a wood block to hold on to. It just like makes it so like it doesn't move, and like it feels more solid. Yay! I'm so happy with this stamp. Okay, what's next for me? I'm excited to explore bigger prints. I've been sketching a lot to like make something bigger than the size of a stamp. And also I've been seeing people on Instagram like stamp on felt or like print on felt. And I'm excited about that. I feel like I want to explore that too. And right now I'm working on a little t-shirt project. They make ink similar to the ink that I used to label the stamp blocks that are specifically for fabric. So I wanted to make a little t-shirt for myself. And yeah, you'll probably see that on Insta, but also here. So if you want to see that, subscribe. But yeah, this project really ignited something in me. I feel like I'm like ready to like make things that make me happy and make things for myself and just like share it with people, because that's what I've always wanted to do. And yeah,